everyone, so I want to do a quick little brush up on how to paint glass or high reflective items in acrylics. First off, you're going to need a really good drawing with a reference image probably to help you pick out where some of those unpredictable little highlights and shadows are. Because what makes glass glass is how it distorts and warps and reflects light, and how you see things through it, or how those things get misshapen as they're perceived through it. So I like to go ahead and get that drawn out with all the shapes of the highlights and the shadows, very similar to how we work on the face, and then paint pretty much the background and all around it and what you're going to be seeing through it. So that's what we're doing here. Going ahead and just spacing in those backgrounds that unify all the colors both behind it and what we're seeing through it. And then we'll build up the highlights and the greens and the midtones and the shadows on top of that. But I went over my drawing with a marker, waterproof marker, so that I'm able to kind of still see those lines through it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be much of a drawing left by the time I had that background color in. So first thing I like to do is lay in sort of my tones, my midtones, and my shadows all in the same color. I can go through and make things darker, but it's just nice to give myself some anchor points and a sense of shape. We're working with a colored glass, but it's a very translucent color, so it's just a little bit of green. We're also slowly filling in that table color in the background. And glazing a couple different colors of browns together by mixing this deep burgundy red with a Kelly green that I'm also using in the bottle. And I'll use touches of that red to create kind of a muted purpley tone. I'll carry that red and those neutrals up to create some of our shadows and bars of shadow up inside the bottle itself here. I'm going to feather them out a bit so that they're not so strong. I certainly don't want them to be as dark as the table itself, but it's nice to have a bit of that reflected color carried up into the bottle. Next, we are going to start planning some of our highlights in those lighter colors. So I like to prep that by just using pure white, even if I'm going to end up adding more green in those areas later. And I sort of have all these shapes laid in. I can see them faintly from my drawing underneath. And I'm exaggerating this one a touch so we can really see it, but I'm pushing my highlights very, very bright because those truthfully are, but I'm also exaggerating some of our green tones and our midtones in this to help us perceive it the way that is most clear. So I found this Kelly green, I'm putting it in. It is about the color of that highlight on the outside. It's a little, I'm using more of it than is truthfully in the picture, the reference. All of this has been done wet blended, so I think that that's something I find, at least when I'm, sorry, my dog is very active today. I find very useful when I'm doing especially the first few layers is to do it almost entirely wet blended. It allows me to not focus so much on actively blending my colors, but lets me put pure white down and slowly just build things up without having to worry about blending them. And the kind of painterly effect that wet blending creates when you're just working this way works really well for glass and reflections, in my opinion. I do usually let it dry before I do a final pass for high shadow and high bright highlights. So I've let dry and I'm coming back in. I've popped in a little bit of deeper shadows here. I like to sometimes, when I'm working very small and the white is just hard to get crisp, I did a lot of my whites already with a paintbrush, but I've also used a gel pen once in a while just to kind of bump them and to get those little itty bitty reflections in. It's just a very nice controlled way to do it. But you can see I used a fine brush to already do these whites. I used a very fine little brush to get some of those dark purple shadows. So we've really pushed our contrast in this. And I think it's that combination of sort of allowing the shapes to be true to what they are in your reference image while also really making sure that you're covering the full range of colors and the harsh lines that we get in our highlights that make things look more like glass. Your shadows and your highlights have these beautiful, unpredictable, like watery shapes, and that really helps it come across the way we think of. And so that gives us to our finished product here. Do a little slow scan over it so you can see some of the littler details. I'm trying to work smaller also because that's comparative to how things will probably be within your renderings. But really pushing those sort of painterly strokes, find your midtones, find the unpredictable colors, and really have a really bright highlights with defined edges. And it's a pretty good way to convey glass pretty quickly. Good luck.